I'm a professor of New Testament. I'm also the advanced degree director at the college. I've been at the college since 1990. I did my doctorate at the college and then was hired on to teach Greek when I was doing my doctorate, and then just kept getting hired on, and now I'm a full professor of New Testament, and I couldn't be happier. It's just the best place in the world to work. I love the students who come. They're bright and receptive and full of passion for the gospel, and we're part of a great research university, and there's this porous line between the fun stuff in Toronto and the university campus, and then of course Wycliffe. So it's fantastic. I love it. I fell in love with Paul pretty early on. I think I probably fell in love with Paul when I was a university student in InterVarsity, and I read Romans, and I just was blown away by Romans. I thought I understood it, and I realized over the course of many years that I still don't understand Paul. He's a mystic, he's a religious genius, he's obviously an incredibly significant historical figure who changed the course of world history. So my main passion is spending time with Paul. I've worked on, in the early days of my research career, I was asking questions about his social mores, particularly about women. I've developed into thinking about him much more theologically rather than historically. Right now I'm thinking about him in terms of what he thinks about time, and that has many scholars think that that has been solved, that he either thinks salvation historically, that there are periods of time that God is controlling and eventually there will be an end to time. Well, Paul thinks that God has invaded time in Jesus Christ and changed the nature of time, and that time will end. I'm not sure either of those explanations account for all the evidence, and I'm not sure either of those explanations don't go beyond the evidence as well. So I've become fascinated by thinking about that, and noticed things like he actually never says that time will end, even though many commentaries will say, Paul says time will end. He actually doesn't talk about the new age. He talks about this age, but not the new age. So just paying attention to the text has created some big questions for me and brought me into a very interesting conversation. And that's been a conversation I've been part of in my research for the last 2 or 3 years. But I've also written on women in the Bible. I've written on Greco-Roman ethics, Paul's ethics, some gospel studies things. And yeah, so I get to do things that I would want to do anyway. It's the best job in the world for me, because I'm doing what I naturally want to spend my time doing, which is going deep into the biblical text. And I get to do it for a living. And I get to also talk about it, and people come to hear me talk about it. I mean, and then I also preach quite regularly. I am an honorary assistant at a church near here. I am an Anglican priest, and so I find the cross-fertilization between my research and my pastoral work really wonderful. They feed into each other, and I'm very grateful to have both. Well, I do find that the things that I think about in the office and work on for publications affect the things that I preach about, and I think and say in church leadership positions. So I think through that conduit of being a leader in a church on a regular basis, my research kind of seeps into that environment, and then I think that environment is a place where people are transformed if they allow themselves to be transformed, and then they are outside of church in their daily life behaving a little differently because they have seen things a little differently.